Planning Advisory Committee public meeting to order. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? None noted. This is a joint meeting for 1, housekeeping official plan amendment 10 to the North Huron official plan, and 2, the 2015 North Huron zoning bylaw update. The purpose of this public meeting is for the Planning Advisory Committee of the Township of North Huron to consult with the public on 1, housekeeping official plan amendment 10 of the North Huron official plan, and 2, the 2015 North Huron zoning bylaw update. 2, the requirement for the public meeting. This public meeting is required to be held pursuant to section 17, 21, and 26 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended, and is circulated as directed by section 3, Ontario Regulation 543 of 06, amended Ontario Regulation 467 of 09, and section 5, Ontario Regulation 545 in 06, amended Ontario Regulation 470 in 09 of the Planning Act as amended. The purpose of the zoning amendment, Laura Young from the Planning Department.
Good evening, Council. So, the background to the North Huron housekeeping official plan amendment number 10. Last year, the North Huron official plan had a 5-year review, and as well, the provincial policy statement, PPS, also underwent an update. The PPS is a provincial set of policies that direct planning decisions. The Huron County official plan was updated this past year to reflect some of the changes required by the PPS, and also the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority completed an update to their floodplain mapping. This mapping change was approved in late summer 2015. All of these updates mean that the North Huron official plan requires some additions to keep it current and conforming to all of the other required planning documents. So the changes for the official plan amendment 10. The surplus dwelling severance policies are being revised. The current requirement for minimum distance separation, MDS, is being removed, unless a house is being severed from a barn that is keeping their barn, from a farm that is keeping their barn. For example, a house being severed off a farm, and the farm is one farm over from a pig barn, for example. MDS no longer applies to the neighboring pig barn, but if the farm that was severing off the house was keeping their barn that was capable of holding livestock, you would apply MDS from the house to the barn on the retained farmlands. The additional use of aggregate recycling facility is added as a permitted use in the extractive resource section. The policy for not permitting development in endangered and threatened species habitats is being clarified to state it must meet all provincial and federal regulations, and the limit of 5 lots to be created on private services is being removed, but a policy that these services must be suitable for long-term septic disposal is being added. As similar to the zoning update, an additional policy recognizing that North Huron has lands adjacent and very close to an airport is being added, and anything incompatible proposed would be discouraged. This mostly refers to the height limitations of the airspace around the airport. And the mapping change for this official plan amendment is an updated flood fringe for the Wingham map that shows the newest flood mapping from the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. The area mostly affected is north of the river on the west half of town. The flood fringe does not mean that development will not be permitted in that area, but just that there is a risk of flooding recognized, and any proposed development could possibly have to undertake precautions as determined by the MVCA. So onward to the North Huron zoning bylaw update. So this is a separate item within the agenda and a separate motion. Again, the 5-year review for the official plan last year means that this update for zoning is required to follow as per the Planning Act. It is nice timing that all of the planning documents, the county OP, the PPS, plus the Maitland Valley mapping for their flooding was also done to include all of the most current policies in this update. These changes have not deviated much from the original presentation of them in September. Again, the document has had some renumbering errors corrected, and the alphabetization of the document makes it easier to use. There were some new definitions added, different types of wineries applicable to the area, second unit per resident, and some revision of the existing definitions to update them according to the other planning documents. In the general provisions, the airport adjacent height limitation was added, including reference to the new Appendix 10 that was included. Hazard lands and MDS were edited, and out-of-date wind energy references were removed. In the agricultural zones, AG1, AG2, AG3, and AG4, some new uses and accessory uses were added to the various zones, and the largest change to the agricultural zones is the automatic rezoning upon the approval of a surplus dwelling severance. When a surplus dwelling is severed off of a farm and approved, the former entire AG1 property becomes AG2 for the retained farmlands, and the severed house property becomes AG4-9, provided it doesn't need any further special provisions for the severed house. So this would remove a second application for the applicant and save them time and be more cost effective as well for the process of severing off the house of the farmland. There were 2 new zones added, the floodway zone and the flood fringe. The flood fringe is an overlay zone that shows the existing flood fringe as determined by the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, but all existing zone uses underneath that flood fringe zone continue to prevail. So for example, an R1 residential zone would have a flood fringe over top, but all permitted uses and provisions for an R1 would continue to apply to the property, and it wouldn't restrict further development, just that according to MPCA, there could be special flood provisions that need to be taken. The floodway replaces most of the former open space zones in the indented floodway, and it is a non-development zone. Open space was also non-development, so this doesn't change or further restrict some of the uses that were occurring in the open space, and it's more in line with the mapping from Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. A letter was sent out to landowners to have this change apply to their properties. Some comments were received, as summarized in the report circulated to councilors. From discussion with the landowners and confirmed with the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, it was determined that no further action or changes were needed, and taken in result from the comments received for this change in property. For natural environment, previously there were 4 natural environment zones, NE 1, 2, 3, and 5. Some of them were very similar, and it was confusing to determine which zone was applicable to the property and which use would prevail by their designation in the official plan. So to make it less repetitive, NE5 was removed, and all of the former NE5 zones became NE1, meaning they are fully protected. All of the previous NE1 zones became NE2, which is limited protection. NE3 remains the same, but now has the distinctive title that development is permitted, because one of the permitted uses that has and remains in NE3 is the construction of a single dwelling. On the new zoning maps, the previous NE1 special zones are now marked as zone changes because they became NE2 special zones. No changes were made to their permitted uses or special allowances. It's just to mark that they now conform with the changed designation. So for example, NE1-2 is now NE2-4 to keep with the consistent numbering in the zoning. The industrial and residential zones didn't have major changes proposed. There was the permitted addition of a licensed medical marijuana facility to IND1, and second units are permitted in residential zones R1 and R2. For the mapping, overall the maps are easier to read and more well organized. As mentioned, there are the 2 new flood zones and the changes made in the natural environment zones, with the NE special zones becoming now NE2 special zones. There was the addition of Appendix 10, which is the airport adjacent height restriction, as presented to council back in fall. So I am recommending that both the official plan amendment and the zoning update are approved, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Laura. Point 5, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of North Huron before the zoning bylaw amendment or the official plan amendment is adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of North Huron or the County of Huron to the Ontario Municipal Board, and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body. Members of the public are asked to provide comment. Is there anybody from the public that wants to ask a question or clarification from Laura? Okay. Are there any comments regarding the housekeeping official plan amendment 10 to the North Huron official plan? And 2, are there any comments regarding the 2015 North Huron zoning bylaw update? Okay. The Planning Advisory Committee, and for those in the audience tonight, the Planning Advisory Committee is made up of a total North Huron Council, but in this meeting, we are a committee. The Planning Advisory Committee, is there any questions or comments? First on the Housekeeping Official Plan 10 amendment. And secondly, are there any comments regarding the 2015 North Huron zoning bylaw update? Okay. Point 7, zoning bylaw procedure following the public meeting. This is a public meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee, not a council meeting. Thus, a decision of the council may or may not be made this evening. If the bylaw is passed by council, the clerk is required to send notice of the passing of the zoning bylaw and notice of adoption of the official plan amendment to all persons and agencies notified of this public meeting. There is a 20-day objection period from the time notice of passing of the bylaw has been mailed by first-class post, wherein submissions or letters of objection or support in respect to the passing of the bylaw will be received by the clerk. There is a 20-day appeal period from the day after the notice of decision is mailed by the County of Huron for the official plan amendment. If an objection is received, an appeal is lodged with the Ontario Municipal Board. And at that point, the township no longer has any control over the time factor involved. If the bylaw is passed and no objections are received within the objection period, the clerk certifies that the zoning bylaw is in force and of effect as of the date of its passage, and notice is forwarded to the Huron County Planning and Development Department. If no appeals are received during the appeal period for the official plan amendment, the County of Huron mails a notice advising that the amendment is in full force and effect to all persons and agencies notified of this public meeting. Laura has already stated that the planning department's recommendation to the committee. And in this, the official plan amendment, do we have a committee member that would like to, Bill, you are
I'll move that we recommend acceptance or approval.
recommended approval. Brock, you're seconding. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. And two, for a motion on the zoning bylaw amendment. James, motion in favor of approval?
Yes.
And Ray seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and point 10 is adjournment, so that there being no further business before the Planning Advisory Committee, the public meeting is hereby adjourned.
Thank you.